Well, welcome back to another episode of Rethink Real Estate. Today, I'm joined by Mark Johnson. He is the co-founder and managing partner at Recruiting Insight. And not only does his company consult for well in excess of 150 teams at the moment, and also brokerages in this perspective of recruiting in such a turbulent real estate industry, are the words that he's used, is that he's also talks today about the recruitment and retention of building a team. And you might be sitting there as an agent going, well, hang on, what does recruitment have anything to do with me? I'm just an agent looking to sell real estate. Now, a lot of the agents that we have, and certainly from the surveys that we've sent out and the people that are communicating with us in the Rethink Real Estate Network, they're agents. Most of them have teams. And Mark says something really interesting today along the lines of that retention is recruitment. And I thoroughly believe in that. And let's face it, it's really great to get industry insight in a real estate industry that has been totally cannibalized by real estate models that certainly haven't proven profitability yet, and how you compete with that. And it all comes back down to the fundamentals of actually caring, believe it or not, caring. And we talk a lot on that topic today. It's a really interesting episode when it comes to industry dynamics. So hope you enjoy and it gives you some good insights, folks. And thanks for joining us on Rethink Real Estate. Welcome to Rethink Real Estate. My name is Ben Brady, and this is a real estate podcast aimed to deliver sales strategies, marketing tips, and business insights from industry experts and myself to build a listing-focused business for the future. Let's get into it. Well, folks, welcome back to another episode of Rethink Real Estate. Today, as I've introduced Mark, this is a juicy topic, as I'll say, in the sense of recruitment in the real estate industry. But Mark, welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Ben, and congratulations on your success.
Thank you so much. That's good of you to say. Either way is that I think that the space of recruitment, I think, is one of the most prickly topics that we can go through when it comes to the real estate industry. I want to frame something from my opinion perspective first, Mark. And again, you and I haven't spent a great deal of time together, but I want to give context to my opinion of the industry is that when it comes to recruitment, it feels like the industry has been cannibalized by models such as, the Compasses of the world, the XPs of the world, the Reals of the world, like these other industry models where none of them have had to prove that they are profitable yet. So it's put a false expectation into the world of real estate, and it's restricted individual and independent office growth. And then also it's affected people's ability to recruit good people onto a team and then not lose them for longevity. Can I get your thoughts on that as an industry whole?
For sure, I'd agree with you. There's turbulence in the real estate industry means that companies with the best agents are going to win. And right now, with a supply-constrained market where new to newer agents are struggling a little bit more than traditionally, it's getting even worse because the only way to grow at the moment is to find someone else from another company to come join your firm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the struggle here is the expectations when you start a conversation with somebody around these. Like, again, we've got people that have got great real estate businesses, but to write a check up front for X amount of dollars makes zero sense. And then giving away basically every single dollar. I liken it to a theory, Mark, of like Amazon will always beat Walmart. And the reason why is that I call it that Walmart has smoked the crack pipe of profit. So they're addicted to it. So they probably only invest 80 cents out of every dollar back into the company. Where Amazon, Jeff Bezos has gone on record where at the board meeting they've made a profit. And he's like, you guys are idiots. Why do you allow the company to make a profit when we can, when we don't need to for the stock price to continue to go up? We can invest $1.10 versus their 80 cents. So they'll always continue to innovate and keep going further. At what point does the buck stop and the industry maybe resets, or do you think it never will?
No, you're already starting to see it. And many of these companies have already come back and said, hey, this was a mistake. It's not sustainable. Part of that is over the last few years, the industry has, bought agents to come over. It's also attracted new agents who started their careers in this kind of response to the great resignation and COVID-19 health crisis. And as you know, with a supply constraint market, normally we would have, let's say, 1 million listings for sale right now. We have nearly somewhere in the U.S. around 400,000. it's not suitable for many new to the real estate industry agents, and they're going to have to reintegrate back into the traditional job market, putting pressure on these companies to maintain a profit.
Yeah. So you get to consult with a great deal of people from a recruitment basis, big teams that are out there. So to the agents listening here that are interested in building a team, what's your philosophy around recruitment and retention? Because, you sent me a quick note before today's podcast that I loved it. Like, recruitment is retention. Like, I think and I might have got that wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong, but
Retention is recruiting, right? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
yeah, the first thing in recruiting is you got to be able to keep your own folks, which means you have to be really clear on your niche. Like, I love your niche of auctions, right? It's unique. It's clearly defined. It is believable, and it has results. It's a true niche. So do we have a niche? Do we have the ideal agents who fit in our culture? Not everybody fits everywhere. And finally, what's our value proposition?
Hmm.
The first thing we see with teams is lack of clarity on those three things: the niche, the ideal agent that fits within their culture, and the value proposition. And without that foundation, it's a revolving door, or you have to pay for them, or things that just aren't sustainable or long term to a viable business.
So take us through the process of how you get people get them clear on those things.
Yeah. So the first part is actually a consulting session around what is your niche. Like in your case, we would talk a lot about auctions,
100%.
right?
Yes, exactly.
Because it's clear, it's compelling, it's believable, and it has proven results, right? So we like to take our clients through where we identify what's the problem you can solve, what's your solution, and what's your social proof.
Okay. And then
yeah.
Yeah, does it reflect on where they are at? At what point in time does somebody have the right to go and recruit somebody? Like if I'm a team, what point in time have I earned that right? Because I find it happens too early a lot of the times. People have zero structure in play or value proposition or understand their business in any way, shape, or form, and they burn people in the industry, and then they burn the idea of actually growing their business because it's too early.
Yeah, you and I have probably coached and counseled more agents than we could count who started a team for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to make money off other people. Well, that's the wrong reason. Or starting it too early. They start too early when they don't have their own foundation set, more or less. They don't have more leads they can handle. They don't have everything systemized and checklist. They don't have their own personal assistant who can help them expand. So to earn the right, in my opinion, to start that, you have to have your own foundation solid, and then have the right intent of why you want to create a team.
Yeah. What do you think is the purest intent?
Well, I guess that's different for all of us, but really wanting to make a difference. Being a servant leader as you are, and I am, is different than wanting to have a money grab, right? So when you're a servant leader, that means you want to contribute back to your community. You want to help other people grow and develop, and the ripple effects to their families and their communities. We could go on and on about different purposes. I'm working with one team right now who's one of the purposes of why they started a team is because they want to contribute more to a local charity equal to their current salary. And that's one of the reasons why they want to contribute to this charity that means a lot to them. And they view this as one way to help that, and then to help the families build the businesses, the ripple effects down to their families.
It's interesting that it would be very difficult to compete with that level of purpose.
They're driven because it's so they're purpose driven. That would maybe be purpose driven would be a common element.
So what do you see the common most mistakes when it comes to the failure of a retention plan for an agent? Like, I think that I really love the idea of focusing a little more on the retention element of things, because at the moment I think that it's important that when anybody is actually out there struggling from a transaction perspective, it's always the grass is greener on the other side, and they're not focusing on watering their own patch. So what do you have to constantly remind them in the retention place? What are the principles of retention?
Yeah. And I just wrote a blog that I'll have to send you about, it's my broker's fault.
Yeah,
You know,
I actually read that. I read most of it. I didn't get through all of it, but I really want to make reference to that in this podcast, and we will make sure that there's a link to it as well in the show notes. But take us through that.
Yeah. So it's so easy to blame the broker. And in some cases, maybe it's deserved.
Hmm.
If we're not pouring into our agents as servant leaders, which is providing the right training, the right environment, there's probably 16 gaps that most agents have. And it starts with the mindset, and it goes to the database, and then contacting the database, and lead attraction. So these 16 factors are critical to retention. And if a team leader or a broker owner or an office manager isn't really in tune with those, it's easy to get off into all these other things that don't matter. But what really matters to all of us is per person productivity, because that's the only thing that pays the bills.
Sorry to interrupt the podcast, but wanted to ask a quick favor. If you're seeing any value in what we're providing, we'd love it if you could like, follow, or subscribe, whether you're listening on a podcast or watching us on YouTube. One step further is that if you can think of anybody in your community that this episode could help, we'd love it if you could share it to them so we could cast our message further and broaden our audience. Thanks again.
And so there's two ways to kind of lead a team, in a sense, to simplify it. You can be a coach, team leader, or you can be a lead provider, or some kind of hybrid, right? And if you're a coach, it's going to be really clear. Here's the value proposition you have, and the training and the coaching and the development. If you're a lead provider, and here's how we generate and provide leads. And then all the training and support around those is super critical for retention.
Can I ask you on that point, because I really want to clarify that from a point perspective, is that someone the other day commented on our social media. They're like, "Oh, forget teaching people how to prospect. You should just provide people leads." And my response was one of which that I thought about, because my actual response was, in my head, probably not appropriate for this podcast. But ultimately, Mark, my response back was, I feel sorry for anybody that goes looking for leads in the first stages of their career, that just basically, because the only good leads that are out there, nobody has cracked the code on seller leads. I don't care what anybody says. There's no such thing as seller leads at this point. Nobody's cracked that code. So you're basically just giving people buyer leads. And you see these agents that run around and just waste their time trying to make a quick buck with these people without actually going out and building the fundamentals of a business. I guess that's maybe probably everybody's entitled to their opinion on this point, but I think that if you're coming from a purpose-driven business, as ultimately we just determined before, the purpose to help and serve your people is to upskill them and see them grow. So therefore you benefit that, and you can't resent them growing external to you. There's got to be a loyalty to themselves. But I think people are trying to design businesses with leads just so they're like, you can't go anywhere because I own these leads, and you can't, you need to stay with me, and I'm going to make you a servant to me, essentially.
Yeah, and that never works, right? That it might work short term, but as I get older and hopefully more wiser, I've kind of let go of these. Here's the only way or the one way. In a previous work I did, I had two very successful teams in the top 1% of all teams in this particular area that I was in. And one had a coaching model and didn't provide any leads. and another was a total lead provider. So they had two totally different models, but they both had the highest retention of their members of any team that I was working with. And I was working at the time with about 150 teams. So they each had a different approach, but there were things that were common in that they truly, totally loved their agents. In a sense, they were servant leaders, and they met frequently with their teams. They had frequent discussions. They had a relationship, a business relationship, around common objectives, and those things were common. But everything else they did in their business was totally different. But they were both equally successful in terms of number of sales and sales volume.
Wow, that's interesting, isn't it? So it came from a genuine place. Like I'm assuming that like the people that were providing leads, were teaching people to convert, to teach people to build a relationship, doing all of those things, not just going, "Hey, this is your source. You can't leave me because I'm giving you a source." Because I think that's a really good point. Maybe I'm not at the point of my life yet where I've actually detached away from some opinions that probably are pretty blunt, but
Right.
I think that realistically is that I never thought about that lead perspective, that if it's done in the right sense, it could be wonderful for people. I always just thought about the fundamentals of real estate. And probably it does come from an Australian mindset, because in Australia, you can't represent buyers. You're only getting listings is the only way that you can make money. So maybe that is just a bit of narrow. Maybe that's back to the original foundations of what real estate is for me. But that's a really interesting concept that you've seen them both equally succeed just as well, but their intention was around their servants, being servant leaders to the people within their business.
Yeah, and on the lead side, you're exactly right. Teaching them, how to work them, how to build report, all the nuances. And this person was an expert in that, where this other person wasn't an expert in that, but it was an expert in helping them develop other things.
Yeah.
But Ben, isn't that true of almost anything? It's like something can be used for good intent or bad intent,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Do you know, someone said something to me today that I thought was really interesting. There's obviously, have you heard about the Cash App situation where the founder was shot dead? Everybody thinks that it was because of illegal activity, and Cash App is, villainized because it's only for illegal activity. Somebody said to me today, and I thought it was a really strong point. It's like, Cash App is only being villainized because ultimately you can track what is done illegally with it, where there's a lot of people in the world that use cash illegally, but cash has never said that it's illegal.
right.
Yeah.
So coming back to teams, I'd like to give your audience a few indications of, you asked me when it's kind of appropriate to earn the right to have you reached your personal capacity? Are you ready to take on new responsibility? Because some agents forget, when you take on these agents, you're taking on the responsibility of leading, and it's a big responsibility. Are you ready to let go and delegate, automate, or eliminate non-money making activities?
Yeah.
Do you have enough systems volume to bring on more people? Are your operations set, your checklist, and your marketing? So there's a couple things that might help your audience.
Well, I think there's a part of this also that I think that you're 100% accurate in the process side of things, because I think there's a commonality when people are trying to build a business that they put the person on to build the processes. It
Right.
actually has to work the other way around, and that's my opinion of that. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And they expect that the person that's coming into the business to build their business for them, the business needs to be functioning and operating well before that person gets there, and it has to have its own identity well before the person gets there. Don't get me wrong, there can be tweaks, there can be things done. But I guess there's a part of this that a question, because of you get to see this on such a large scale, what are the red flags when you see an agent within a team or an agent in an office or whatever it is? What are the red flags that somebody's looking to change?
Oh yeah, there's all kinds of them, um, and I've got a couple ideas on social media that are outside the scope of this. That when people disengage, and you can notice, hey, Mark normally comes to the meetings every week, and now he's not coming, right? So disengagement of some type. Any dramatic change in behavior. Um, those kind of things. Even in the tone of the conversation, normally is, let's say cordial like you and I are having, and maybe they become more terse,
Yeah.
or short, or not existent.
Yep.
It's why it's really important. In a previous life, I always looked for any of my agents who didn't have a closing within a certain period of time, particularly if they had a pattern of having in that period of time. And I would reach out to them personally. Hey, just checking in. How are things going? And you'd be amazed at what you find out. Oh, my wife passed away. My kid had cancer. That they may not be reaching out unless you're closer to them.
Yeah.
So for retention, my buddy Steve Murray did a study that showed those who have the highest retention are closer to their people. And if you think you're close to your people, whether it's a team, an office, or a brokerage, we all need to get closer.
Yeah.
That's the formula for retention. It sounds old school, but we just got to know our people better and closer. We got to get closer together.
And it feels like the industry is starting to, it feels like it has been for a long time starting to form to a model that it's at arm's length and about numbers. I think that, EXP has gone through this big recruitment from a couple of other virtual companies, and I think that it's very, very easy for people to leave to a better deal when there's zero connection to a company whatsoever. But do you find that
what concerns me about that?
What's that?
As you and I know, as coach leaders, accountability is the number one barrier to all of our success. And when you have accountability and a structure in place that is utilized, we see great results. But when you can hide and mask your accountability, because you're part of some bigger thing, but you have no accountability, it's a red flag and a formula for disaster. Accountability is a good thing.
Well, I think that the thing that where people struggle though, as a business owner or a team leader, I think it gets overemphasized where, let's say that an agent leaves the team and they go to another company for a better split or a bonus or whatever it is. You often find that there's a few people that aren't far behind those people in a wave of people leaving, because then the others just convince them around the monetary elements of things. If you had an agent leave your team or an office, and that they were out probably trying to re-recruit your agents again, what would you do within the business? What would you address? Because I've often found, and this is where I'm trying to go with this, is that by the time that there is a conversation that they have with you, it's too late. It's already done. They've already made up their mind.
I'm so glad you asked this question, because I'm going to give away a little secret sauce. I grew a very large firm, 5x in revenue and agent count and all that kind of stuff. Part of what I did, every 90 days, I asked every agent 4 questions in a survey format. What are we doing well? What could we do better? Would you refer us to another agent? And anything else you want to tell me? And every 90 days, I'd ask those questions. And I would get so much feedback, positive and improvement, that we became known as the firm that is listening. And it was the greatest retention tool I think I've ever done. And it was so simple. What are we doing well? What could we do better? Would you refer us to another agent? And anything else you want to tell us? Every 90 days, like clockwork. I didn't miss it for 5 years.
And was that you calling every agent and asking those questions, or was that more of a survey basis?
It was a survey basis with then follow-up from myself and my executive team. So anybody who responded, depending on what it was and the level, got some type of contact from a senior executive.
Whose responsibility is it to communicate with their agents, and how often? Is it a 90-day thing? Because I know for anybody internationally listening, I know our Australian businesses over internationally in New Zealand, they're like, what do you mean? I speak to them every day. And don't get me wrong, they're smaller teams in that sense. Like independent office ownership, they're like one of the biggest offices in Australia is only 100 agents, where here the biggest office is 450, or plus. Whose responsibility is it to get a connection? Because I find that most of the time is that they want the owner.
Mm-hmm. Everyone in the organization, in my opinion, everyone from the person who empties the trash to the CEO and everyone in between is responsible. And part of the culture that I've seen that's most successful is where everyone, in a sense, is serving the cause, which is the agent and the customer. Now, you bring up a good point. I chose to do it every 90 days. That didn't mean I wasn't talking to people and asking those same questions as I met them on a daily basis. But in a formalized, systemized strategy, that survey was a basis. And then I had 5 years of history that I could go back to. Here's what we heard. Here's what we did. And then I started feeding back to them. Here's what we heard. Here's what we've done. But yeah, I would have those conversations daily as well.
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to say that that's the only time you listened or talked or engaged, but it was a systematic, grooved process that was just institutionalized, if that makes sense.
It does. No, it does. Because I know, like talking to a lot of leaders within the real estate space, Mark, is that I personally, and not that a lot of them would admit to this, but at the end of the day, I think that you can read between the lines in a lot of situations, and the reading between the lines is a lot of people don't like asking for feedback because there is an essence within our industry that people are addicted to drama. There's no question about that, but sometimes from a leadership perspective, you don't even want to ask for feedback because you know that if you put a soapbox up, someone's going to stand on it and they're just going to start saying bad things. Now, does that say more about the leader, or does that say more about the management, or what's your opinion on that?
It all comes back to leadership. And so I had an approach where, people would propose things that just made no sense or weren't part of our business model. And as a leader, I was confident enough to go back and say, hey, thanks for your feedback. Here's why we're not going to do that, or here's why we do it this way. So in full transparency, as long as there's transparency, people will understand it. It's when I think you try and hide it or avoid it or bury your head in the sand, that's when you get yourself in trouble. So my style is more to, hey, let's put it out there and talk about
it.
Yeah. You and I could agree to disagree. Like if I came to you and suggested, well, we don't do auctions anymore.
Sure.
Well, that ain't gonna fly. But here's the reasons why. Here's why we do it. Here's what, and at least you can have an intelligent conversation about it. You can explain your business position. I find it better as a leader because it challenges me to think through. And if in fact I'm intellectually honest, from times I've changed a policy or procedure.
Yeah. Being able to look at it from, trying to steel man it from their position is certainly something that from a leadership perspective, in a company perspective, you definitely need to do, and not just simply think that, no, I've decided this way and I'm going to die on the sword in the field, regardless of whether or not you can prove me wrong. But that said, I guess that, do you believe that by the time somebody approaches you to say, hey, I'm thinking about moving on, do you believe that that is pretty much a done deal at that point? Or do you think that there's a way to bring it back?
There's always a way to bring it back, but by that time it's too late.
Yeah.
Right. It's, and that was the beauty of the survey I did, because we could catch stuff earlier. And we had other procedures where we reached out to agents on a periodic basis and team members. How can we help? What's going on? These kind of touch points, because you want to catch it early. And when there's red flags, you mentioned red flags, disengagements, haven't heard from them for a while, no closings, social postings, that you can see are indications of a move. So there are red flags, and the more you can get ahead of it,
Hmm.
be proactive, just like anything else. I had a story a couple months ago. I had one of those rocks that hit my windshield,
Yeah.
and it had the little thing on it.
Yep. Yep.
I thought, I need to go get that fixed. And then I got busy and I got delayed. And then the next day I came out and it cracked all the way through.
Cost you
What would have been a
four times the amount. Yeah.
yeah, what would have been $100 fix cost me now 1,000. It was
Yeah.
almost 10x.
Yeah.
And it's the same. It's the same here. When you see that little crack, you can turn the other way and avoid it, or you can hop all over it.
So you said that you had some thoughts around social media, and you just mentioned it before. What were your thoughts around that?
Well, on a personal basis, I think there's some analytics around, depression and suicide and others, where people, let's say, one of my friends is posting every day, and then all of a sudden they don't post anymore.
Yeah.
There's something going on, right? And there's flags we can see, and I think there's lots of, beyond real estate, just socially, engagement in social media. But we can also see it for socially active agents and teams. I had a very prominent team who basically started posting for about 4 weeks about change, quotes on change, quotes on new horizons, quotes on frontiers. Well, it was just a major red flag. And guess what?
They changed.
Changed, right? And so, I don't have the perfect science behind it, but there's something to socially active agents and clues that you can see in what they're doing.
Can I? Here's a strange question. Is there
I
any
love
is there any point that you're too close to an agent? Is there any point that, like, at some point, then there's a lack of respect?
just like in the coaching relationship. Once once you want it more than they want it, you're no longer the coach or the leader or the you can't want it more than they want it, right?
That's a great point. That's such a good point.
Yeah, and so that's a red flag if you want it more than they want it. And then two, look, many people know that I was with the Tom Ferry organization for a number of years and worked with coaches and clients all over the world. We had 5,000 clients at the time, and I was one of the people that would help our clients switch coaches. And many times they would say, I've become too close. I've gotten, we're now friends. And so our calls are now more of a catch up versus accountability and business building. And when that happens, now it's a less effective relationship. No, I'm not suggesting that we don't become, friends or, whatever with our associates. But you're exactly right. There is a line between where it can become a barrier to your effectiveness. And so a high EQ helps you understand that. And if it naturally happens, then you need to find someone else who can, serve in that role.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you, so.
Oh, did that answer the question? Or?
Yeah, no, it did. Like, I think that, so let me put a situation to you then. Like, so let's say that you've got an office, it's 30 agents, or you've got a team and it's, 7 or 8 people, and those people have become too close to you, so to speak. And you can just see the indications of that. The red flags are there from a perspective of you just know. Is it better to then replace you in the situation, right? Then, for example, I'm an office, I've got 30 agents, like, I'm not going anywhere, I'm the business owner. Rather than see those people leave and go elsewhere at this point because, there's a friendship, but it's not enough to ultimately hold them there. Do you replace yourself to bring somebody else into it? Like, and what I mean by that, replace you from a coach perspective, get some external help. How does that work?
Yeah, that's a really complex question. I don't know that there's a canned answer. One of them could be, as a leader, to challenge yourself.
Yep.
Hey, as a leader, I need to step up. I want a relationship with these people. I want to be close to them. We're part of a team. We're a family. Some people, we're a family, but I'm also the leader.
Yep.
And so part of it can be stepping up to say, hey, and name it and claim it and say, here's the deal. Here, I'm going to move forward with this leadership and accountability style, and name it and claim it. So that would be one way to do it.
Okay.
Another way to do it could be to insert somebody. That has pros and cons.
Yep.
But if done appropriately, could be a great way. So I think that's a custom solution depending on the leader and the team that would have to be understood before the right go forward strategy could be designed.
So there's another part of this. There's another part of this as well, Mark, that I sort of reflect on in this situation. Let's say that you're dealing with a team member that ultimately you feel that they're disconnected or they're not turning up as much. Do you address that with them, or do you find that provoking that situation is a catalyst to them probably leaving eventually?
Yeah, I've always been a big proponent of closing loops. Open loops, in my experience, have never been a good thing. We all have open loops. That conversation that you and I need to have, that conversation we know we need to have with someone, that meeting that we keep putting off. When we have open loops, from my experience, it ripples into all other things of our professional life, our personal life. So in my approach, it's always better to address it and bring it up, even if that means accelerating that person leaving.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it helps them move on to their new chapter where they're going to be successful, and then helps me create then the opportunity to backfill and find someone that can better match my niche, better match my target ideal client, and better match my value proposition.
Well, Mark, I wanted to sort of close out this conversation with giving some insight to how you can help people and where they can find you. Obviously, we'll link to everything in the show notes, but this is obviously a topic where I think I find you more like a psychologist of people versus a recruitment specialist. I would say that, at the end of the day, navigating those types of relationships that people have or wanting to grow their business, it would be more from a psychological perspective than anything else. But obviously, the practical element of what you do, you have a great deal of process that you have a great deal of strategy that you allow people to take. What's the best, what would be the best way for you to be able to help somebody, and how do they find you?
Yeah, and since you mentioned that, we did write a white paper called The Psychology of Recruiting that I can get to as well. That's
absolutely
very, very powerful. So we have a number of solutions at Recruiting Insights that can help from teams to brokers to multi-office large firms. We have a in-depth product line, starting with a scalable recruiting solution for new agents, a coaching solution to develop a system strategy instructor for helping recruit inexperienced agents. And so they can find us at recruitinginsights.net, recruitinginsights.net, and check out our various products and solutions, and reach out for a consult. We do 20-minute to 30-minute consults all the time, and sometimes we find we're a good fit and we can help people, and other times we help them find other solutions that might be a better fit for them. What we're not, which I think is clear for people to understand, we're not the cold callers. We're not the ones you're going to call and say, "Hey, are you going to do 1,000 calls for me?" And we're more of a by referral kind of a system versus, "Hey, you're going to do 1,000 calls and beat your head against the wall."
Well, I think that's a really good clarification on your offering. I appreciate the insight in, to use your words, what turbulence is going on within the industry at the moment. So thanks so much for joining us on Rethink Real Estate.
Yeah, you're welcome. Really enjoyed it, and congratulations on all your success and what you're doing at Harcourts. It's really impressive.
Thanks, Mark. So about 75% of our audience hasn't liked, followed, or subscribed to our podcast. It would mean the world to us, and it would help this podcast more than you know to expand our reach if you were to like, follow, or subscribe on any of the platforms that you're watching or listening on. Thanks again.